Good afternoon. Je tiens d'abord à souligner que nous sommes réunis sur les territoires traditionnels de nombreuses nations, notamment les Mississauga de Credit, les Anishinaabe, les Chippewa, les Haudenosaunee, et les Wendat. And I am so glad to be here with my friend, Jamie Maloney, the local MP. He is also the chair of the Ontario caucus. So he's someone I have worked with for a long time and is a great champion of the people of Etobicoke and all of Ontario. I'm also really, really glad to be here at the YWCA with my friends here. Nothing gives me more pleasure than visiting Canada's incredible early learning and childcare centres. As we begin a new school year, I'd like to take a moment to thank all the childcare workers and educators across Canada who work so hard to give our kids the best possible start in life. And I want to give a special shout out to Sarah, who is the chef here for the kids. Maybe when you guys are leaving, you can take a look at the menu that she posts for the kids every day. She talked to me about it, and she talked to me about how hard she works to create every single day delicious, nutritious, and culturally diverse foods for the kids here. They get everything from chicken tikka to gnocchi to various Albanian delicacies, and she tries to make sure that each child has the foods from their own heritage culture here at the Child Care Center. I think that's wonderful. So, bravo, Sarah. Lorsque nous avons annoncé pour la première fois dans le budget de 2021 notre plan visant à mettre en place un système pan-canadien et abordable d'apprentissage et de garde des jeunes enfants, plusieurs personnes ont dit que c'était une bonne idée. Toutefois, il y en avait d'autres qui ont exprimé des doutes. C'était compréhensible car cela faisait près de 5 ans que les politiciens canadiens promettaient de mettre en place un système national d'apprentissage et de garde des jeunes enfants. C'est pourquoi il est si important pour moi d'être ici avec l'équipe extraordinaire du YWCA et de voir les résultats de notre programme de garde d'enfants. L'engagement que j'étais si fière de prendre dans notre budget de 2021 n'est plus seulement une promesse. Nous l'avons accompli. Fees here in Ontario have been reduced by an average of 50%, saving families up to $8,500 this year per child. And Ontario is on track to reach fees of just $10 a day by 2025. I cannot overstate how important affordable early learning and childcare is to our economy and to our country. This is feminist social policy in action, and it is also smart economic policies. Studies show that every dollar invested in early childhood education generates between $1.50 and nearly $3 in activity for the broader economy. Nearly 950,000 more Canadians are employed today than were before the pandemic. And that includes a record 85.7% labor force participation rate in July for Canadian women in their prime working years, supported by our early learning and childcare system. This record level of 85.7% compares to just 77.5% in the US. At a time when labor shortages are constraining industrialized economies around the world, and at a time when labor shortages are also contributing to inflation around the world, affordable early learning and childcare is adding to Canada's labor force, helping our economy to grow, and making life more affordable for families here in the GTA. As we continue to deliver our Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare, it is so important to support places like this one so we can learn about what more we can do to support our wonderful educators and parents and families like those here in Etobicoke in Jamie's riding. So to everyone here at the YWCA, I want to say thank you all very, very much. Before I close, As Finance Minister, I'd like to comment briefly on the Bank of Canada's announcement this morning. The Bank of Canada's decision to maintain its overnight interest rate is welcome relief for Canadians. As Finance Minister, I fully respect the independence of the Bank of Canada as it delivers on its mandate to return inflation to target, which will support a return to the steady growth and stable prices, which were the hallmarks of the pre-COVID Canadian economy. The bank has a hard job to do, and our government respects the bank's independent role. We also understand that an independent central bank is a cornerstone of Canada's broader institutional stability and economic and fiscal policy credibility. The strength of our governing institutions underpins Canada AAA rating and helps to make Canada such an attractive destination for foreign investment. As the bank continues its important work, my number one priority is to use all the tools at my disposal and to work with partners at other levels of government across Canada to ensure that interest rates can come down as soon as possible. Thank you very much. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Global News here. So NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh today said that your government should clearly give the message to the Bank of Canada that it should no longer raise the interest rate. Are you willing to do that?
I was clear in my remarks and in my statement today, just now actually. Our government understands how important an independent central bank is to Canada more broadly. You know, Canada is respected around the world. We owe our AAA credit rating in part to the fact that we have strong, stable institutions. And those institutions include an independent Bank of Canada. I'm always going to respect that. Our government is always going to respect that because we understand that the strength of the Canadian economy depends on the strength and stability of our institutions.
The premiers in Newfoundland, Ontario, and BC all called on the governor of the Bank of Canada to not raise the rates today. Do you think that is an appropriate thing for the premiers to do?
Again, I'm going to speak for myself. And I have a very specific job and a very specific role when it comes to the Canadian financial system and the Canadian institutional framework. I'm the finance minister. And that means it is really incumbent on me to support the independence of the Bank of Canada and to make clear to Canadians and to the world that our government is always going to stand up for an independent central bank. Not too long ago, the leader of the official opposition was publicly calling for the governor of the Bank of Canada to be fired. That kind of comment from someone who would presume to take the highest office in the country is reckless and irresponsible. Our government, by contrast, understands that we need to stand up for Canada's stable governing institutions. That includes an independent central bank. We'll always do that.
Thank you.
Ça va, je suis prête.
Aujourd'hui, le taux directeur reste stable, mais ça monte depuis longtemps. Ça alourdit le fardeau financier des Canadiens. Les partis d'opposition vous accusent d'avoir causé l'inflation et les hausses de taux d'intérêt de la Banque du Canada. Est-ce que vous vous sentez responsable de la situation actuelle? Et est-ce que vous pensez que la Banque du Canada devrait avoir un autre rôle son mandat?
Alors, je voudrais commencer en disant que notre gouvernement comprend l'importance de l'indépendance institutionnelle du Banque du Canada et on va toujours être clair que nous avons un système qui était très très bon, très très fort pour l'économie canadienne, dans lequel le Banque du Canada a une indépendance institutionnelle. Nous comprenons ça. Notre code de crédit AAA reste en partie de cette structure institutionnelle. Nous comprenons aussi que le taux directeur est très difficile pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes. Il est très difficile pour les ménages canadiens et canadiennes, pour les petites et moyennes entreprises canadiennes et canadiennes. Hier, j'étais dans mon bureau de circonscription et j'ai eu les réunions avec des étudiants et des leaders de petites et moyennes entreprises. Et ils ont parlé de la situation économique d'aujourd'hui. Ils m'ont exprimé à quel point le taux directeur d'aujourd'hui est difficile pour eux. Et c'est important pour tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes de savoir que notre gouvernement est à l'écoute, que je suis à l'écoute aux Canadiens que je représente au Parlement. Et c'est pour cette raison que j'ai dit aujourd'hui que le cible principal pour notre gouvernement, c'est de travailler avec nos partenaires autour du pays, d'utiliser tous les outils qui sont disponibles pour le gouvernement, de créer les conditions économiques au pays qui permettront de baisser le taux directeur.
La Ville de Toronto demande depuis plusieurs mois de l'aide financière du gouvernement fédéral pour faire face aux gouffres financiers dans lesquels elle est et pour répondre à la crise des réfugiés. Comment le gouvernement fédéral peut aider Toronto?
Notre gouvernement est fier d'être le gouvernement fédéral qui a aidé le plus la ville de Toronto, la plus en comparaison avec tous les autres gouvernements fédéraux qui existeraient. Cette année, le gouvernement fédéral va verser plus de 1,8 milliard de dollars à la ville de Toronto. En contraste, en 2015, quand notre gouvernement a été élu, le gouvernement de M. Harper a versé 200 millions de dollars à la ville de Toronto. Alors, la différence est évidente. On est fiers d'être là pour la ville de Toronto. Je suis une députée torontoise, Jamie est une députée du Toronto. On comprend l'importance de cette ville incroyable et c'est pourquoi on a fait beaucoup des investissements dans la ville de Toronto et on va continuer de faire ça. On doit aussi souligner que la province d'Ontario a une responsabilité directe pour la ville de Toronto. La position fiscale du province est très forte grâce aux investissements que le fédéral a fait pendant la pandémie et la province doit aussi faire sa juste part.
Hi, Minister. Heather Batsa, CTV National News. You've just commented again on the central bank's decision to pause, saying once again it was a welcome relief for Canadians. But ministers don't typically comment on monetary policy decisions. So why do you feel so strongly that it's important for you to make a statement? And do you believe the bank should pause hikes for the rest of the year?
So a few questions in there, and let me start by saying it is the bank's job to bring inflation back to target, and I absolutely respect the bank's institutional independence in that work. The institutional independence of the Bank of Canada is one of the foundations of the Canadian economy. It's one of the foundations of our entire democratic institutional framework. It's a reason foreign investors have confidence in Canada. It's a basis for our AAA rating. And, let me remind people that we're living in a time when that independence has been called into question. We've had the leader of the official opposition publicly say repeatedly that the governor of the Bank of Canada should be fired. At that time and today, our government wants to reiterate that we stand firmly for the independence of the Bank of Canada, and we believe statements like those are absolutely reckless. Now, when it comes to interest rates and their impact on Canadians, I think it's important for Canadians to know that their government understands what they're going through. And yesterday, I spent the day doing my job as a constituency MP. I spent the day in my constituency office. I talked to students. I talked to the leaders of my ridings, BIAs. And what I heard from them in very direct personal stories was the impact that high interest rates are having on Canadians. It's important in our parliamentary democracy for people, Canadians, to know that they can have those kinds of conversations with their MPs, that they can have those kinds of conversations with their finance minister. And it's important for them to know that their finance minister hears them. And I absolutely do. And that's why I also said in my remarks just now that I believe, our single greatest economic priority, certainly for me as finance minister, needs to be to use all the tools at my disposal to work hard with leaders at other levels of government, to do everything we can to create the economic conditions that will allow prices to stabilize and therefore will make it possible for interest rates to come down. I think that's where we are in the Canadian economy. We understand the pressures Canadians are facing and we're there with them.
Change subjects now for you and just talk about the disclosure of vaccine contracts. The disclosure of vaccine contracts in South Africa. Contracts released show that vaccine manufacturers charged huge prices and required advance payments from the South African government despite not knowing when they would even arrive. So all of this at the height of the pandemic. Will Canada release its vaccine contracts, and is it ethical for vaccine companies to be charging such large amounts during a time of a global pandemic?
Wow, really taking me back to the challenges of peak COVID. And I just want to start by reminding us all what a challenging, traumatic time that was. And I actually heard from some of the early learning and child care educators here what a challenge it was for them, for the kids, and how some of the kids only now are getting through some of the trauma they endured because of COVID, some of the educational lags. It was a really, really tough time. And our government understood that we needed to do everything we could to get vaccines here for Canadians, because we understood that by getting vaccinated, we would be able to get through this pandemic more quickly, do things like lifting the lockdowns, which were so challenging for the people working here and for the kids working here. It was a really, really tough time. I am proud of how Canada came together in a Team Canada effort, and I'm proud of how hard we worked as a country that didn't have the capacity to produce its own vaccines to get the vaccines that Canadians urgently needed at that very, very challenging time.
So would you release the contracts?
As I said, it was an emergency. We acted urgently, and we got Canadians the vaccines they needed.
Hi, Minister. James Bradshaw from the Globe and Mail. No one can recall a finance minister taking quite such extraordinary measures as you have with Wealth One Bank of Canada and its three founders. And I'm wondering, can you tell us why this was necessary, and what were your concerns about China and money laundering and national security in that instance?
Thank you for the question. As finance minister, I take my responsibility for the security and the stability of the Canadian financial system very seriously. As finance minister, I also have a regulatory role, and so I'm afraid that I can't comment on processes that are underway right now.
I suspect that will preempt the second question, but I'll still ask whether the three founding shareholders have divested their shares, and if not, what you would do, what measures you would take if they do not comply, if they do not divest their shares from Wealth One within the time frame you asked for. And I suppose because you talked about stability and soundness, can you also say whether you have any concerns about the viability of this bank under these terms and without the capital of the founding shareholders involved?
Again, my regulatory role constrains what I can say. So let me just emphasize that I take my responsibilities as finance minister for the stability and the security of the Canadian financial system very seriously. And it's inappropriate for me to comment further on a process that is underway. I will, yeah, I think it's inappropriate for me to make any further comment. Okay, thank you very much. And do check out the menu. It's very impressive.